What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Live Before Lock Show. I'm Dave Loughran, with me, Adam Scherer, and we're glad to have all of you guys with us. As always, 3-game slate, breaking it down, making things happen here. 4 p.m. games, 6:30 and 9 o'clock. So, Adam, starting in the next 58 minutes, we're going to have basketball throughout the rest of the night. And unlike other slates that have become not predictable in results, but predictable in analysis, this one's a little bit different because Damian Lillard will not be playing. And, well, Russell Westbrook was surprise questionable. Looks like we both expect him to play. Aaron Gordon remains out. And, well, this slate the shape of this slate starts to look a whole lot different with Lillard out and Westbrook potentially in.
Yeah, it's the first slate that I think we've really had in a while where there's really relevant late news. It kind of feels like one of the seeding game slates where there are good plays from the first game, but the more flexibility you can leave yourself in your lineup going into that Rockets game and, you know, maybe getting news by then for the Portland game, you're going to have an advantage if you can swap based on news.
Let's dive right into it. We've got 3 to talk about. We'll touch first on Orlando and Milwaukee. I tweeted during game 1 around halftime that I said I still expect Milwaukee to win this game, but if they don't, they're going to go on and rout the Orlando Magic in 4 straight games. So far, I was wrong that they'd win game 1. Been right about them routing them in 3 straight ones. They had a 15-point victory in game 2. They won by 14 in game 3. In game 4, they won by 15 points again. Adam, looking at this one, Orlando's on their last breath. Sometimes you see teams put up a fight in the last game. Other times they just lay down and die, especially when they fought so hard in other games to try and keep things competitive. Like game 4, for example, they kept things very close until Chris Middleton finally woke up from his coma and had a big fourth quarter, and then they ended up pulling away. We saw the Brooklyn Nets, big first game, had a chance to win, and then they were somewhat competitive in game 2. Game 4, it was a wrap. They lost by 100 points. I think you definitely could see something similar to that today with Milwaukee and Orlando. 14.5 point spread, Milwaukee laying those points.
Yeah, I think 2 games on this slate have that feel where it's like it could just be over and, you know, maybe they don't end up being competitive whatsoever. But obviously with only 3 games, you kind of have to think about what you want to do there. And, you know, I did it for the Lakers game. I didn't do it for the Orlando game. But, you know, one thing you can do, I think that is somewhat effective is, you know, we talk a lot about not wanting to project blowouts because you kind of end up just shortchanging, in this case, people like Giannis and Middleton by doing that. But you can run multiple sets of projections too. Like you can run some crunches where you project this game to be close to the end and, you know, you project both teams that way. You can also run them where you don't. It is, you know, a 14-point spread right now, I believe. And so Giannis obviously is the starting point for Milwaukee. Like even if this game blows out, you assume that he had a big game and that's probably why it blew out. He is getting a lot of ownership today, which I thought was interesting because right now we have Giannis projected for about 40% ownership on DraftKings. We have Davis and James from the Lakers both projected right around 20%. That's a little bit weird to me because I assume it's because it's really difficult to see how Portland hangs in this game without Damian Lillard, but the point spreads are about the same. So if that ownership doesn't change, I do think it's kind of an interesting spot to go to one of the Lakers guys over Giannis. But ownership aside, the Magic still haven't found anybody to slow Giannis down.
No, and that's been the case. Giannis has been consistently good throughout this series, while many of his teammates have struggled. Giannis with averaging 30-plus points, like 15 rebounds in the series. He's just actually more than 15 rebounds in the series. He's been putting up astronomical numbers and carrying this team for the most part. They're starting to turn things around elsewhere, it looks like. And I only say that because you go into a matchup against a more difficult team, against a better team, and you're going to have to start looking a lot better than you have at periods throughout this. So especially Chris Middleton, who last game had 3 points going into the fourth quarter, Adam. He turned it up, knocked down 6 field goals in the fourth quarter, finished with 21 points, and was the catalyst for them pulling away with it late. He's $7,800 on DraftKings. Are we in a position where Chris Middleton is worth looking to today at ownership, currently coming in around 12%?
Yeah, so I think some of the lineups that I've made before the show that I like the way they look, they are built around Middleton. Two of the three of Middleton, Bledsoe, and Brook Lopez, and then don't have Giannis. And the thinking there would just be that you're having a lot of ownership go to Giannis and a lot less ownership coming in, like I mentioned before, on James and Davis. You can build some pretty good lineups that have Bucks out, that have the main Bucks guys minus Giannis, saves you some money there, and then you can get to one of the main Lakers guys. And I think that gives you a little bit more contrarian build, but it also gives you some leverage against the really popular Giannis, because the only real way that you can see Giannis not do well at his salary outside of injury is that this game is over early, and it's because Middleton's hot or Bledsoe's hot. Most likely in that case it would be Middleton, especially with how they're trying to get him going into the next series. So I think that's a viable kind of narrative that you could use to build lineups. From a median projection standpoint, and it's reflected in ownership, Middleton, you're not really going to get there because you have McCollum playing without Lillard in the last game at a similar price point. You have Giannis and to a little bit lesser extent, the Lakers guys and Harden at the top. There's plenty of value with Lillard being out, so it sets itself up to kind of get out of Middleton's price range from a roster construction standpoint. You also have the Oklahoma City guys that are good plays, so that should keep the ownership down. But I do think that from a narrative standpoint, you can kind of see how a Middleton plus Bledsoe or Middleton plus Lopez lineup could do really, really well.
The one thing that bothers me though is we're in the postseason. Minutes are huge across the league. And Middleton has played 31, 31, 31, and 32 minutes. Now, normally you'd say that's okay. That's what we've been used to seeing him do all season long. He averaged around 30 minutes per game on the year. But it is a little bit more difficult for me to see that playing time and not at least want to look elsewhere in a league where coaches are running many of their starters for 38 minutes, 36 plus minutes. And listen, I know blowout risk is there with certain Portland players, with Lakers player, but it's there with Milwaukee too. So projecting Middleton for more than 32 minutes becomes pretty difficult.
Yeah, I think and I agree with that point, and I haven't really rostered Middleton in the playoffs because of it. But the one thing that I think makes it a little different on this slate is just, for one, the three teams, or that there's three games, and two, what the three games are. Because, Orlando, you're not getting big minutes from their guys either outside of Vooch. The guards there haven't been playing a lot of minutes. On Portland, McCollum, you assume plays big minutes if the game's competitive. But outside of that, it's just guard value, basically, and Melo is really cheap too. OKC is the only real team on this slate that has similarly priced guards that you expect to play a lot more minutes than Giannis, or than Middleton, sorry. So I think just on this particular slate, it's a little bit different because you don't really have, like, the Lakers don't have mid-range, mid-salary guards that play big minutes. Neither does Orlando, neither does Houston, and outside of McCollum, neither does Portland. So I think that there's just a little bit less in that pricing tier that he has to compete with.
That's a good point. Had this been a spot where you've got other teams that were loading up on minutes for other guards, that could be different. You're right, but there's really only a couple here that really make that a big concern. The rest of Milwaukee, you talked about potentially Brook Lopez. Is there any, and if you want to just expand upon this a little bit, is there any incentive to get to somebody like Eric Bledsoe, whose minutes have been limited? He played 28, 26, 26, and 24. And by the way, that 24-point game or minute game, they may have won by 15, but it was very close for almost the whole game up until like a few minutes or midway through the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I mean, with Bledsoe, I think it's a little bit tougher because he's playing even fewer minutes than Middleton. You mentioned Middleton's minutes being down, but Bledsoe is down in like the 26 to 28 minute range. Yeah. So even harder for him to really break a slate open. Lopez, I think, has a little bit more value because he's playing more minutes than Bledsoe, for one, but also because the center position on this slate isn't really that great. You have Steven Adams, who has very legitimate concerns of his own. You have Vooch at a completely different price point. You have Whiteside, who has very legitimate concerns. Nurkic is expensive. Houston doesn't believe in centers. So it's kind of a open position today, at least in the price range where Lopez is. So I think it ends up being a pretty useful roster construction piece.
Can you make an argument for anybody else in Milwaukee? Just because we have to, I want to ask about Connaughton, whose minutes have been in the low 20s. He got up to 24 minutes in one of those. Aside from that, you've got a cheap George Hill, but these are really all guys that Mike Budenholzer mixes in. He just doesn't give anybody quite enough to really become someone that gets you excited.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be more interested, or I could see myself getting to a Hill or a Connaughton easier if in our final ownership update before lock, their ownership comes down. But right now, looking kind of in this price range, you have very similar ownership projections on Connaughton and Hill as you do for like Lou Dort or Danny Green or KCP. KCP actually a little bit higher, but it's tough because if you assume both of these, the Milwaukee game and the Lakers game are somewhat competitive, you're getting probably 5, 6, 7 more minutes for the Lakers wings. You're probably getting 10 more minutes for Lou Dort. Obviously, he produces at a lower rate, but with the ownership being pretty similar, I would rather just go to the guys that I think get a few more minutes. If in the final ownership update, you're getting more of that going to Green, more of it going to Dort, and you're cutting back on Hill and Connaughton, then you can do that. You obviously just wouldn't want to play them with Eric Bledsoe. Probably would only really want to play them with like one of the main guys because you're hoping that you just get a few extra minutes at the end of the game.
All right, let's move on to Orlando then. If you're good on Milwaukee, it sounds like you are.
Yep.
The Orlando Magic will be without Aaron Gordon. That's no surprise, but he has officially been ruled out, hasn't played a minute in this series, which definitely hasn't helped them. I honestly don't think that it would have made a difference, but at the same time, that's another body down. You know, they're down Jonathan Isaac too, and that has definitely worn on them. Nikola Vucevic is coming in north of $9,000. He's had a couple really huge games in this series, Adam. And I guess at this point, with the narrowing down, with us having 4 games and now only having 3 games, is Vuce in play?
Yeah, because for one, the center position, like I said, is really weak. If you're not paying down, you basically have Nurkic, you have Vuce, and if you want to call Davis a center, you have Davis. So there's no question on the upside for Vuce. We've talked about it before that it's a really favorable matchup for him because he's the one guy on Orlando that, for one, is really good, and 2, Milwaukee just doesn't have an answer. He's not dependent on scoring at the rim, so Brook Lopez's defense isn't as much of a concern. He contributes in every category, rebounding, he gets assists, and obviously he's the highest usage guy on the team. And he's playing big minutes. He's coming off of, I believe, a 38-minute game last time out. So all that looks really good. The biggest concern for me is that you do have right now 30% ownership going to Vuce on DraftKings, which again is just kind of weird because he's getting more ownership right now than Anthony Davis. I know he's a little bit cheaper, but there's just as much risk that Vuce loses minutes to a blowout here as there is that Davis does. The only difference is that if the Milwaukee game blows out, Vuce probably didn't play well because he's on the team getting blown out. Whereas there's a decent chance that if the Lakers game blows out, Davis still has 50 plus fantasy points because the Lakers are killing the Blazers. So I would rather be getting to Davis at current ownership. I know he's a little bit more expensive, but I don't think value is really an issue here. So that would be my one concern. But, you know, if Vuce's ownership does come down and Davis starts to go up, I don't think there's any question that Vuce has a monster ceiling here. I
think that's a great point about whether or not these blowouts happen. If one happens, it benefits, or it's probably because Davis played a hand in it. If they get blown out in Orlando, it's going to have a lot to do with Vuce probably not playing well. Now, at the same time, is Steve Clifford going to say this is the last game? I'm just going to run him no matter what, even if it's a 25-point game going into the third. Why not keep him out there and see if they can cut into this lead or this deficit? I don't think that's a crazy thought, knowing that they're going home if they lose anyway.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. So let's keep this moving with the rest of Orlando. You've got Vuce leading the team with 79 touches per game in the postseason. And then you got to scroll all the way down to get to Markelle Fultz at 65.3. He's had a couple good games. He's had a couple underwhelming games. His price point is still, I'd say, somewhat reasonable, but the ceiling on Markelle Fultz is just so limited. And Clifford clearly is not willing to say, all right, you know what? You're playing well. Let me play you for 35 minutes, 38 minutes. That's not the way it is. DJ Augustine continues to get viable minutes off the bench. and he's going to play 25 plus minutes a night too, which curtails Fultz's upside as well.
Yeah, it's kind of just really difficult now that the Orlando guard prices are at least somewhat creeping up, because that's been the big thing with them so far, is that on most slates you've had teams priced really kind of expensive, except for the Orlando guards, and so they've been really, really popular value plays. Some successful, some not. But as the prices start to slowly creep up, and with Lillard being out, you get some value opening up elsewhere. It's tough to really prioritize them. I still think that rotating through them is fine because they're still relatively inexpensive and it's only a 3-game slate. But Fultz at 5,100, Augustine at 4,800. Ross at 5K, Fournier at 5,400. I think they're all pretty much just priced where they should be because they all have pretty legitimate concerns. You mentioned Fultz's minutes. He played about 32 minutes last game. That's the most we've seen from him in this series. Augustine's typically playing around 25, 26 minutes. Fournier still doesn't have a usage rate over 20% in any one game in this series because Milwaukee's been focusing on keeping the ball out of his hands, which has driven his assist percentage up a little bit. But you're still seeing mostly underwhelming games. He finally kind of put it together last game. Still, only shot 4 of 14 from the field. So these guys all have, kind of legitimate concerns. And with the exception of Fournier, they're all mostly playing around 30 minutes. So I think I prefer Augustine over Fultz today just because his ownership's a little bit lower. That's been a spot where you've seen the field very much just chase whatever happened in the recent game as far as ownership goes. So doing the opposite has been beneficial throughout the whole series. Kind of mixing and matching those guys, but I don't think any one stands out as a great play.
Yeah, Fultz every day continues to get decent ownership, like 23%. Have you noticed too? I think with the fact that Fultz, or I'm sorry, that Westbrook, I think might play, or it looks like he's going to play. You're seeing ownership spread out a lot more. The highest projected owned player right now is Giannis at 40%, not in this game, but on the slate overall. We'll get to CJ McCollum and his price point and his ownership in a little bit, but we'll wrap up Orlando. So we talked Vooch, we talked Fultz. Is there anybody else here? And we got to Augustine as well. Is there anyone else here that you think makes sense against the Bucks? Must-win game. They won't, but it's a do-or-die spot. They're going to get minutes. Does Terrence Ross come into the picture for you at all? Maybe he puts up monster numbers as a scorer and is completely blanked elsewhere. Can we talk about anyone else in Orlando, or is it kind of moot?
Ross is basically the same to me as the other guys. He's like you said, he's very scoring dependent. They need his scoring. I expect him to get around 30 minutes and get up plenty of shots, but he's also priced, I think, pretty much where he should be. So yeah, he's getting around 16% ownership, which is in the same ballpark as Augustine and a little bit lower than Fultz. So, again, it's just kind of mixing and matching those guys into different lineups, but nobody out of that group really stands out to me. And then you also have, of course, Gary Clark and James Ennis, whose salaries have come up. 11% projected ownership going to Ennis and 14% going to Clark. I think both of those are pretty much where they should be. If I crunch 150 lineups, that's about where I get to. And the problem is, that there's a good chance neither of them close. If the game is close, there's a good chance that you get a closing lineup of Fultz, Augustine, Ross, Fournier, and Vooch, or at least you only get one of Clark or Ennis in there. So it's tough to really count on those guys either.
SuperDraft is the sponsor of the Live Before Lock show right here at Awesemo.com. It's SuperDraft.io, where you can download it in the App Store. You can also get $10 in free Supercash simply by signing up using the promo code Awesemo10, AWESEMO10, all one word. When you deposit $10, you get $10 immediately straight into your account, or $20 in free Supercash with $100 plus deposit. Check it out. It's all multipliers. There's no salaries. It's a very cool format where instead of Giannis being $12,000 on FanDuel, he has a 1x multiplier on SuperDraft. The same thing goes for someone like Chris Middleton. Instead of 7,800, he has a 1.4 multiplier. That's how you find value. There's going to be guys that have 2x multipliers, meaning whatever they score, they get twice that. Or they get 80% more than their production if they have a 1.8 multiplier. You play 3 guards, 3 forwards, and a center. And like I said, put a little bit of money in there, you get more money into your account. $10 on 10, $20 on 100 or more. Just use that promo code Awesemo10, AWESEMO10. Download it in the App Store. Go to SuperDraft.io, sponsor of the Live Before Lock show. On to the next one, OKC and Houston. The Oklahoma City Thunder are showing right now, you're looking at a lot of ownership on Gilgeous-Alexander. So I guess we can start here and then we'll get to the Westbrook situation. The Houston Rockets 4-point favorites, 225.5 total. All of these games have totals between 222 and 227. So nothing higher, nothing lower. Oklahoma City lost 2 straight. They looked brutal. And now they've won 2 straight. They've tied it up at 2, going into game 5, and they'll probably be going up against the backcourt of Russell Westbrook and against James Harden. So I was just looking at a message there. Josh was saying George Hill is out. You saw that?
I hadn't seen that.
Huh?
I had not.
Me neither, but it's pretty important if it's true. Let me just check here. I don't know. Let's keep talking. If I find, you haven't seen that? Okay.
No.
He sent me a link. Let's see.
The Bucks aren't even on the injury report.
Do we trust this guy, Josh? Jake Chapman? I don't know.
I refreshed. Yeah, I don't see anything about it.
I got 1 like. I don't know. We'll see. But as of now, let me see what's going on here. He says, I think so. Well, let's see. Maybe it's right. Pay attention to that. I don't know why he would lie about George Hill being inactive, but we'll pay close attention to it. If you guys find anything, let me know. Feel free to throw it in the link, and we can move forward from there. But let's jump back to OKC and Houston.
So I'm seeing stuff on Twitter, but it's not from anybody that I trust.
That's what I'm saying. Me neither. Let's see if it comes from a verifiable source first, and then we can dive back into it. What are you doing with the Thunder starting with SGA?
Yeah, I mean, he's still pretty affordable, and he's playing huge minutes. You saw during the regular season that he played a ton, and it's been the case in the playoffs as well. He played about 43 minutes last game. He's in that same price range as Middleton, and he's one of the guys where, you do kind of look at Middleton, you look at Gilgeous-Alexander, and it's just like, how does Middleton beat Gilgeous-Alexander in essentially 1 quarter less of playing time? So it's obviously a good spot for Gilgeous-Alexander. He's gotten up at least 17 field goal attempts in each of the last 3 games. He contributes rebounds. He gets enough assists to kind of pad his floor, and he's capable of scoring. So we have him projected for 32% ownership right now, which is relatively high on this slate, but I think it's for good reason. And I don't have any problem with it. In the crunch I did before the show, I actually came in at 32% on Gilgeous-Alexander. So I agree with the ownership. I think it should be there. I think he's a really good play.
Okay. I agree with it as well. And this series has turned into a pretty good one, really. Gilgeous-Alexander played 44 minutes last game, 48 minutes the game before that. I mean, you're talking about monster playing time. And this is kind of what I was speaking to with Middleton, Adam. I'm not saying Middleton is competing with SGA in terms of roster spots here on DraftKings or FanDuel, but Gilgeous-Alexander at a similar price point, you're getting 40 minutes from him in regulation today.
Right. And that obviously, it's a faster paced game as well. So that is good. It's the one game that you look at and you'd be surprised if it's not competitive.
How about guys like Chris Paul, Dennis Schroeder, and Danilo Gallinari?
Yeah. So, Paul falls off a little bit behind Gilgeous-Alexander to me because his ownership is about the same, but he's more expensive and you expect him to play probably 3 or 4 fewer minutes. I think that, by itself, Paul's a good option, but with the ownership where it is, I would rather go to Gilgeous-Alexander than Paul. I think Schroeder's interesting because he's, really hit or miss, and he's going to get fewer minutes than both of Paul and Gilgeous-Alexander, but we have him coming in at 14% projected ownership, which is about half of the other 2 guards against a small Houston team. You expect Schroeder to be closing. So I think that, maybe he's a little bit under-owned relative to the other guys. In cash, he would be the least likely to get into my lineup out of the 3, but in tournaments, I think he's a little bit under-owned.
All right. Tyler Mason says, does Laffy pay attention to the other guy? He just repeated verbatim what he said. Sometimes I do. Yeah.
Yeah. The answer is usually no.
Sometimes I do. No. I do. Apologies. It's very unprofessional of me. The Flyers just scored and they looked like shit last game. But no, I repeated verbatim because it was a really important point. And I just wanted to drive that point home is all.
So Jake Chapman is an Orlando radio guy.
Yeah.
He said that based on the active inactive list they were given, Hill was out.
That scares me that something may have happened where like it's just a misreporting or someone screwed. You actually see that stuff quite often. So
yeah, I'm not going with it until we get a Bucks reporter saying Hill's out.
Correct. I'm with you on that. And I heard you loud and clear. So the front court situation for the OKC Thunder, Steven Adams is continuously watching his price point drop. His minutes have been pretty stable outside of one game. He's really getting up no shots at all. His shooting is spectacular. You know, he's highly efficient, and his rebounding, as it should be, has been really strong against the Houston Rockets with double-digit rebounds in 3 of 4 games. But production overall has been kind of lacking. At 5,500 on a slate where the center position is thinning out by the day, where are you going with somebody like Steven Adams, if anywhere?
I don't feel good about it at all because I think his minutes are legitimately an issue. You've seen more effective lineups from Oklahoma City when they go smaller, when you're getting, they want to get Dort more minutes so he can defend Harden. Now you're going to have Harden and Westbrook playing, so even more reason to have your best on-ball defender out there. And they don't need Adams, especially when it's not like they're feeding him in the post. Not saying they should necessarily. Obviously that is less efficient, but it's not like that they're going with that as, in the game plan. He's basically getting rebounds, but he's not getting any putbacks. He's not posting up smaller guys. So it's really easy for them to just go with the smaller lineup, especially to close the game. It would be surprising to me if they don't close with the 3 guards, Dort and Gallinari, assuming that Dort hasn't fouled out by then. So I think getting around 27 minutes from Adams is probably more likely than getting another game where he plays 35 in regulation like he did in game 3. That being said, the center position is not great. He is inexpensive. I could very easily be wrong and he plays more minutes. Like that's clearly in the range of outcomes at least. So it's not that it's a bad play. It's just one that I'm definitely not comfortable with.
Yeah. And it seems like most of the field isn't comfortable with it either. He's come 19% on a 3-gamer. I think that's probably where you would anticipate him coming in, honestly. Yeah,
and I think that it's low enough where you start to say, okay, whatever, screw it. I don't think he plays huge minutes, but if there's kind of more upside to acknowledging that you could be wrong and then just hoping that you're wrong than to saying like, I'm super confident in how this rotation goes and that he isn't a good play. It's not like the ownership's coming in at 40% and you're just saying like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that I'm right. And there's an edge here in fading this.
Right. And the game that he did play 35 minutes was an overtime game anyway.
He played it in regulation.
But he didn't. I know you mentioned he didn't play. I'm saying he didn't play anything in overtime. Got 35 in regulation. There's no way that happens again. I know you said there's a chance that you could be wrong. Do you really think he could play 35 in regulation again? It seems insane to think that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the chance that I'm wrong is that he plays like 31 or 32.
That's fair. Now, he also didn't foul out. He didn't foul out.
He got hurt.
Okay, so I'm giving him 27 minutes right now.
That's what I'm at.
I think that's reasonable. And at 27 minutes, I don't think it's crazy that he can put up decent numbers, but he's also not a top option either. Do you have anything else for OKC? We pretty much broke it down pretty in depth.
No, I mean, Gallinari, I guess, the service is obligatory. He's probably going to score like 30 fantasy points, and he's kind of inexpensive mention.
So Houston Rockets, we're still waiting on Westbrook news. The both of us do believe that he's going to play, at least as of now, correct? You have him in.
I do.
Right? Okay. So you have Russell Westbrook in. So do I. James Harden, is 11,800 on DraftKings, 1x on SuperDraft. On FanDuel, James Harden is 11.6. So extremely expensive, justifiably so. He's been kind of disappointing with Westbrook off the floor, not as much on a per minute basis in some spots, but just at times I guess per minute too. He hasn't been needed. Like last game, he was really needed, played 43 minutes at 74 DraftKings points, but he hasn't needed to have one of those monster games where they actually win outside of last game. And he did put up a big game, but they lost. With Russell Westbrook set to return after a semi-lengthy hiatus, he hasn't played since the 11th of August, hasn't seen a single game in this series. Where are we going with the $9,700 Westbrook? Let's start with him.
So, yeah, I assume he plays as well. I don't really love the price tag on him, though, because I assume he plays close to normal minutes. I'd be kind of surprised if you're getting like 40 plus out of him, like you might if he had played the first 4 games of the series. But I assume you're at least getting like mid to high 30s. I think that, obviously we saw really since the Covington trade that he had taken on a bigger role. The spacing has helped him. He's had higher usage. The rebounds have been there. So I think Westbrook's okay, but we also have him projected for about, he was at like 19%. Now we have him at like 3%. So if that's going to be the case, then he becomes a lot more interesting. When I had run my crunch before, I think we had him at 20%. So if the ownership is going to be projected that low, then I start to be interested. But if the field is going there and we think that pretty much all sites are projecting him in, then I don't really love 9,700 for Westbrook on this slate.
What do you think his ownership will be at on DraftKings if he's active? It's a tough question, I know, but
my guess would be like 12 to 15.
Okay. Really? That's low.
Well, because people are going to be hesitant to really commit to him being in. A large percentage of the field is going to play Giannis in the first game, and then not be able to get to Westbrook. Plus, people are going to play, some percentage of people are playing Lakers guys, plus Harden. You have guards from OKC, you have McCollum.
I can't help but think that if let's say this was a 3-1 series, Westbrook probably isn't even questionable. He's probably out still. So I don't know. If I had to guess, a lot of this is him saying, I want to play. I know he's a game time decision, but he's a competitor. This guy's an Iron Man. Very, very infrequently does he miss games to begin with. So if I had to, I'll put it to you this way. I don't love the fact that he was ruled out and then he was ruled questionable. Seeing if we had any news come in. But if there's anybody that I trust going from out to questionable to active, it would be Russell Westbrook. So
yeah, Josh and I were talking about it before the show, and reports were that he'd been running and warming up and everything. So it's not like this kind of came out of nowhere. And the plan is basically to have him warm up before the game and then decide if he can play. Unless he re-injures himself, I just can't see where Russell Westbrook goes out, warms up, and then says, like, no, I can't do it.
Can't do it. Exactly. I don't see any way that happens either. James Harden's very expensive. And if Westbrook plays and now Harden is $500 more expensive than Giannis on DraftKings, where you have a ton of positional flexibility, he's $300 more than Giannis on FanDuel, $500 more than Anthony Davis. And he's $1,300 more than Davis on DraftKings. How do you approach somebody like James Harden if Westbrook is active? Because as good as he is, that's definitely going to be an inflated price point playing alongside another ball dominant guard in Russell.
Yeah, I'm not really interested unless the ownership really comes down. And right now we have him about the same as Giannis. We have him lower or higher owned than both of LeBron and Davis. You're paying a premium for someone that shouldn't be that salary if Westbrook's in. Not only do his rates come down as you would expect, but you have to at least keep in mind that prior to Westbrook's injury, there were basically since the Covington trade, Westbrook's usage in games where they both played was basically the same as Harden. So you actually had Westbrook stealing a lot more recently from Harden than you were earlier in the year. So I think that it's basically you're just paying for what the situation has been the entire playoffs, and you're not getting any sort of discount, which is only really viable, in my opinion, if nobody else is paying it. But I think that you're going to still get ownership on Harden.
The problem here is, assuming both of these guys play, what it's, I won't call it a problem. I'll call it in many cases just a stay away spot. If both of these guys are active, then where earlier we had certain players we were willing to roster with Russell Westbrook out. It wasn't pretty, and it's not as much Mike D'Antoni's fault as much as it is just these guys. One of them going off one day. One day it's Rivers, another day it's Jeff Green doing the work. Another day Covington can't miss any shots. But inside of the bubble since the 30th of July with Westbrook and Harden on the floor, you look at the usage for these guys and it's super, super low. Nobody's above 20%. Jeff Green's only played 19 minutes with them in that case, but like and it's clearly a small sample. You're just not going to get significant usage for anyone with Russell Westbrook and Harden on the floor. And yes, I know they can stagger them, but the whole team becomes pretty unappealing, and a lot of them are priced to Westbrook being out anyway, which hurts even more.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. If we assume Westbrook's in, the only guys on the Rockets that I really have interest in are Westbrook to some extent, depending on ownership, and then maybe like a PJ Tucker at low ownership, just because he's not really going to be hurt because he's not a high usage guy anyway. You just need some rebounds to bounce to him and him to knock down his corner threes. But it's not like him going from a 10% to a 9% usage rate is a big deal. But you have most of these guys priced, like you said, they're all priced for Westbrook to be out. So there's more usage just in general, but also you're getting those minutes for like Eric Gordon, for example, where Harden's not on the floor and he's just running everything. So he's someone that takes a big hit if Westbrook's back because they will stagger them. And it means that Gordon's playing all of his minutes alongside at least one of them. The minutes become a little less secure as well. Like my guess is that McLemore and Rivers are basically just cut out of the rotation, but you could see Rivers still play like 14 minutes and then just see a haircut on minutes for guys like House and Tucker and Green. I don't think they go that route, but they could. So I think it really, if Westbrook's in, just makes me not interested in much at all from the Rockets.
Yeah, of course. How could you be? Last time Russell Westbrook played, it's hard to even tell much anyway because Harden was out that last game. We haven't really seen them play much together inside the bubble at all, but we have a good enough track record elsewhere to get a good idea of what it's going to look like. And the rest of the Houston Rockets team just becomes pretty unappealing overall. I think we can move on from this one unless you have anything else.
Yeah, one other thing to mention, I guess, is that if Westbrook plays, I think it does make OKC slightly more appealing because the Rockets typically will play faster when Westbrook's out there. So, maybe a couple extra possessions.
Okay. Just wanted to throw one thing out here. Was it? Merrick said Westbrook's a terrible play. He's got to be out of shape. Westbrook's a freak, man. Like, I'm serious. I'm not just saying, oh yeah, anecdotally, hey, this guy doesn't get out of shape, doesn't get tired. If there are very few players that could come back and play 35 minutes and crush. Russell Westbrook's one of those. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Go ahead.
And let's not act like he's been out for months or something. The last game he played was August 4th, so he's been out for like 3 weeks. We don't know what
he played August 11th, dude.
I think Harden missed that. Did Harden miss that game?
Harden missed that game. Yep. Because remember they played together. Remember they rotated off the final games of the bubble.
Yeah, the last game they played together was the 4th. So, yeah, I mean, it's been, 2 weeks since he's played. We don't know what he's been doing on the side, but we do know he's been, pretty aggressively warming up before games. I assume he's been doing something to stay in shape outside of that.
Yeah, and it's not like he has any distractions inside the bubble.
Right.
Probably in a better position to stay in shape than ever. I'm not too worried about it, but first we got to get some word on whether or not he's going to play. Got about 19 minutes to go here, 18:38 to be exact. We'll take your questions over the final, 10 or so minutes. So throw them in the hopper, load them up, and we'll get to them. If you have questions for everybody else in chat, feel free to fire away on that. And hey, hit that thumbs up. It is gratefully appreciated. It helps us out a ton here on the show to keep doing it for free, keep getting new eyeballs on it. So subscribe, hit the notification bell, and hit that thumbs up. It's the easiest, simplest, and best way that you can help support us here on the show. Portland and the LA Lakers. After game one, I think a lot of people got a little too excited, right? Just pure jubilance in Portland. Oh, they've got this. They're the sleeper. Not so fast, fellas. And there were a lot of red flags in watching that game. Portland still scored only 100 points. They, in the bubble leading up to that game, Adam, they were beating bad teams by like 3 points, and Lillard needed 50 points to get them there. the Lakers have done a phenomenal job of sealing off the perimeter, taking away the 3-point shot and forcing them to score elsewhere. And they haven't been able to do it with or without Damian Lillard. Now, coming into tonight's game, an elimination game, up 3-1, they're 13-point favorites. Lillard is sitting. This game could absolutely get ugly. Maybe Portland has one last push, right? You see this sometime. It's like that last push, you know you're going to lose, but all of your guys rally. Even the bad players come up big and keep it close through 3 quarters, and then they blow them out in the 4th. I think you could see something like that, but all in all, a 13-point spread is a 13-point spread.
Yeah, and I do think it's really concerning, but with how ownership's looking right now, I think I'm going to just be stacking this game a lot because there's the same concerns in the Orlando game, really. Milwaukee clearly is a lot better than Orlando. The Lakers are clearly a lot better than Portland, especially without Lillard. But the pricing on the Blazers, as far as upside goes, is a lot more favorable than it is on, say, Orlando, who's playing in the same exact situation they've been in for the last 4 games.
I thought McCollum would be a lot more expensive, and I thought his ownership would be higher than it is. Neither are happening.
Yeah, exactly. I think people are scared off by the relatively likely blowout, but it really just all comes back to DFS being a game of salaries. And the only appealing game on the slate from like a basketball probably going to be competitive to the end standpoint is the OKC game, where we just talked about if Westbrook's in, all of Houston essentially is overpriced because they're priced for him to be out. OKC is, for the most part, efficiently priced because they're in the same exact situation they've been in for 4 games. The only team where anything has really changed and they are underpriced is Portland. And then to a lesser extent, the Lakers, because you just don't have LeBron and Davis at the same price points as Harden and Giannis. So you have the superstars on the Lakers that are relatively underpriced. You have the entire Portland team that is underpriced because Dame is out. This game to me is the one that has the highest, the highest ceiling for the money on this slate.
I don't disagree with that even a little bit. Kind of wish I did, but there aren't a ton.
I wish I did too.
What'd you say?
I said I wish I did too.
Yeah, there aren't that many better places to get to, honestly. Like even with Houston, where you say, okay, this game should be the most competitive. Well, outside of Westbrook, Harden's super expensive. If Westbrook plays, not to backpedal, but if Westbrook plays, there's like nothing on Houston that you can feel great about. OKC's got some. You just talked about what's going on with Orlando. This game seems to make the most sense. Here's the way I look at it too, as far as like the ownership and stuff goes, because obviously you could disagree that the ownership maybe think it's too high, but basically what I did before the show was I crunched 500 lineups with this game projected like it's going to be close to the end. I crunched 500 lineups with it projected like it's over in the 3rd quarter, and then I took basically the median projections from those 2 scenarios and used them. And when I went ahead and just like sorted my lineups to see based on median projection and ownership what I would be playing, it was basically just jamming in all the CJ McCollum, all the Lakers, all the Lakers regulars. It was basically telling me that at the projected ownership, there's a bigger edge in assuming this game stays close than in assuming it doesn't. Yeah. Blowouts are unpredictable. Yes, it's probably, maybe it isn't more likely than not. I did a show with Alex a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about a tool that he made that has like blowout risk on it, right? And the one game that seemed like it had an outrageous blowout risk, he said it was only maybe, like I'm saying on the surface, just to the casual observer, to the naked eye, you would think this game's blowout risk is insane. And he's like, it's really only 20% or something. So yeah, I think there's legitimate blowout risk in a spot like this, but you know this, when you project for blowouts and fade a game because of that, it can get you into trouble in a number of ways. And on one hand, it gets you into trouble because the game stays close, or they blow the team out and it's only in the 4th quarter that they really go off. Or the third way is they blow them out and the guys that you were going to play but decided not to are the reason they blew them out. And now they had huge games. So I don't want to get away from this, especially on a 3-game slate where the price points are affordable and the ownership is lower than it probably should be.
Right. And I think to your point, it's important to not look at stuff like this in black and white, like 100% it's going to blow out or 100% it's not.
Right.
Let's say that there's a 40% chance this game blows out, which is absurdly high and almost definitely higher than the real chance. But let's say there's a 40% chance it blows out. There's still a 60% chance that you're getting 42 or 43 minutes from CJ McCollum, who averaged 1.5 fantasy points per minute without Lillard over the last 2 years.
Dude, so, even if this game does blow out, you know as well as I do that in an elimination game, Terry Stotts is still going to give CJ McCollum like 35 minutes in the last game of the series.
Yeah, but I mean, it's, you can just set the highest like realistic probability of this game blowing out, and you're still going to have a greater than 50% chance that you're getting an absurd amount of CJ McCollum minutes at a cheap price tag and relatively low ownership for a 3-game slate.
No doubt. Yeah. Right. 40% blowout risk is massive. It's still 60% chance, like you said, that it's not going to blow out. So you're right. It's not a black and white situation. It's not binary either. Like there are a lot of different ways this game could go. It could end in a blowout and McCollum still plays 40 minutes because it's close through 3 quarters. Anything's possible, man. That price though on McCollum, getting these numbers from him with Lillard off the floor, it's going to be highly necessary that he has a huge game. And let me ask you this. You talk about stacking this game. I think you touched on it a little bit, but if McCollum, usually stacking in basketball isn't necessary, but if it's a spot that has blowout risk, can you elaborate a little bit on how having McCollum, and maybe it was a bigger slate, it'd be more important, but say if you have McCollum and one other player, they would need to have a big game to get their full minutes, which means that their opponent is going to need to put up some big games as well, assuming it stays close. Like, how does McCollum having a big game affect what you do with the Lakers? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that, so if I'm playing 150 lineups, I'm not like forcing it to be, if I have McCollum, I have one of the Lakers stars or anything like that. But where I'm playing 3 max, I am prioritizing lineups that do just, assume, like if I have McCollum, if I have, Melo and Trent, I may as well be playing Davis and or LeBron, because why not at that point? Like if Melo and McCollum and Trent all have big games relative to their salary, you're probably getting 4 quarters of Davis and 4 quarters of LeBron. So why not?
Yes, sir.
I still haven't seen anything legitimate on George Hill.
What'd you say?
I still haven't been able to find anything legitimate on George Hill.
Me neither. Someone just said roster is out. Roster is out for Bucks. No Hill. I don't know what if you're talking about the starting lineup, that's not.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't be in that.
He's not in there anyway. I have not seen anything official, at least not from sources that I trust, Adam. That's kind of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Matt Velasquez, who's one of the beat reporters I follow, a lot of people have asked him about George Hill. He hasn't answered them. He hasn't mentioned George Hill.
No. And people are talking, like saying, oh, it's confirmed, it's on FanDuel.
Yeah, I mean, Roto Grinders tweeted it too. It just means that they saw someone tweet it and decided that it was good enough for them.
Yeah. Could he be inactive? Yeah, obviously it could, but there's not the sources that we use that have verifiably been good and reliable. I haven't seen anything from yet. That's all I can say, honestly. That's all I can say.
You gotta love that it's the playoffs and injury reporting is still this dumb.
Well, is it injury reporting? Is this dumb, or did someone get something wrong and then everyone's running with it? Whereas really it's not the injury reporting.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's kind of why I'm leaning towards it being them getting it wrong, because like are the Bucks really just being like, yeah, no, we're just going to hide that George Hill isn't playing? I
don't think so, but we'll see. And please, in chat, if you're not 100% on something, don't put it in there. Some people see that and they don't know that they should, but some people don't know that, you don't have any idea what you're talking about because none of us have it. Like none of us do right now. I have no idea. So just try not to be an authority on something where, you saw it and there's actually no confirmation. Anyway, Adam, round it out for me, Portland and the Lakers. Spend a lot of time on Portland. If there's anything else you want to get to, go for it. If not, we can take it over to the Lakers and take some questions.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers, I think, looking to some of the cheap wings, and, obviously talked about Davis and LeBron, but looking to some of the cheap wings, I think, makes a lot of sense. You have a $3,500 KCP who... Hold
on. Our own news god just posted something. Matt Velasquez Milwaukee Bucks beat reporter, this is 37 seconds ago. Nice job, News God. Says, based on the box score I can see from home, it looks like George Hill is inactive today, and Frank Mason has replaced him on the active roster for Game 5.
Okay, so I'll take that, I guess.
I guess. That's the best we can do for now. Okay,
yeah.
Go ahead. I might cut in on you if I get verified news since we're so close to lock, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
And I'm doing it right now. George Hill, okay, officially inactive. There you go.
Okay.
That's not too hard, is it? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to update my stuff now. The wings on the Lakers, I think, are too cheap. Caruso, KCP, Green.
All right, so when it comes to Anthony Davis, and I know you're trying to get this in, where would you put him as far, and you want to go short answers, that's perfectly fine. Where would you put him in the same conversation as Giannis and Harden? Obviously above Harden, but do you envision yourself having a lot of Anthony Davis tonight?
I think I'd probably have him second to Giannis.
So, okay, quickly, and then I'll take some questions. I'll let you finish your lineups out. Top players from the Lakers that you're actually satisfied with rostering tonight.
Davis, KCP, Green, Caruso.
Okay. Take some questions here. We got about 7 minutes to go. Let's see here. And yeah, I know the George officially inactive now. We actually got it from a couple places we trust, which is Fantasy Stock Watch and Update says apologize now. LOL. Listen, man, I have to be careful about that. You'll thank me for it over the course of the season because a lot of people get a lot of stuff wrong. And if it's someone I've never heard of before, I'd rather err on the side of caution. Behemoth says Bledsoe too cheap now, right? Yeah, Bledsoe becomes a much better option here, significantly better option. If you're talking about $5,800 on Bledsoe, it's as good as you're going to get. I think I'd be very careful in assuming he plays a lot more minutes, but I think you probably get 30 to 31 from Bledsoe now. Mason comes in and maybe gets a little bit of run. DiVincenzo has even gotten some point guard minutes before. So it's not like Budenholzer doesn't have the options, but I would definitely look towards Bledsoe to get, I'd up his minutes by maybe 4 or so. I think that's reasonable. DiVincenzo or Caruso. That's tough. Adam, DiVincenzo or Caruso?
I would say DiVincenzo just because I can almost guarantee he's going to be lower owned.
Yeah, probably. We don't have updated ownership on that quite yet, but Caruso right now is actually getting a decent amount of ownership. Let me update this and see what we've got here. Caruso, 3,400, 18%. Yeah, I think probably DiVincenzo is the way to go there because it's not like Caruso is going to give you a ton of upside anyway. Fadi, yeah, KCP, I would not be worried about him. I think he's fine. You know, listed as probable. You're good to go there. Let's see here. Best center after Vooch or Nurkic on FanDuel. Best center after Yusuf or Nurkic or Vooch on FanDuel. That's tough. I'd probably go with Brook Lopez. I mean, Whiteside was starting alongside Nurkic last game, which was interesting. Got into foul trouble, only played 17 minutes. They got blown off the court. I don't know if Terry Stotts is going to have the same faith after disastrous results. So I would go Brook Lopez there. It would be the third best after that. How much higher do I value Vooch than Nurkic? I'd say depending on the price, like on DraftKings, on FanDuel, Nurkic is 7,500. Nikola Vucevic is 8,600. So you have a pretty big price discrepancy there. Nurkic still has the ceiling. So in a spot like that, I would say it's not that much. It's more that I like Nurkic than Vooch. On DraftKings, it's only a $600 difference. So Vooch here to me is definitely more preferable. And he's just been outrageously good. I think Clifford probably still continues to give him big minutes here. Adam, Gordon or Gallinari?
Gallinari.
All right. Yeah, I think that's a certainty, actually. How you doing over there? You all right?
Scrambling.
Trent and Caruso or Clark and Dwight. I'd go one on that one, Ryan. Zach, thanks for the super chat. Simmons or Gary Trent? Who do you trust more? Well, that's a difficult question. As far as trust goes, and I'm assuming you're talking about sorry, I'm assuming you're talking about Simons. I would go with Trent because there isn't a Simmons, but I'm assuming you're talking about Anthony Simons. Gary Trent, I trust more to have the potential to get the minutes. Simons, yeah, slightly better per minute guy, but I don't think there's any reliability that he gets there in minutes. Last game was a monster blowout, and that's the only reason he saw it. Shot 1 for 8. Trent's locked into more minutes. Per minute basis, he sucks, but it is what it is. Michael, we don't know if Russ is playing right now. I'm preparing that he is. Let's see here. DiVincenzo and Russ or Fultz and SGA. If Russ plays, I'm going Russ. I think DiVincenzo can have a decent enough game to where you're not worried about Fultz giving like 28 fantasy points. Oh God, are you kidding me? The Bucks haven't come out onto the court, and they might boycott now. Okay. Well, anyway, we'll see what happens, guys. That'll do it for us. Yeah, discussing a boycott. We'll be back with you live before lock next time. Thanks for hanging out. Be sure to hit us up on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS, at Lafayette_D. See you tomorrow.